Good morning. It's a beautiful morning. It's like the song says, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I think some of you guys are what do you call it, old enough to remember those songs, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But anyway, so today we're going to be discussing Diaspora and Origins number 5. This episode is dedicated to refuting some of the common criticisms that we've already received regarding the theory, or rather the explanation. I don't think it's a theory, it's already an anthropological consensus that Ifa or Ifa divination comes from Arabic geomancy, Islamic geomancy, particularly Al-Ram. Now, for those that are a little bit confused and are going, what's going on here? Go and see Diaspora Origins number 3 and Diaspora Origins number 4. Both are available in Spanish and English. This is the English version of Diaspora Origins 5. In the last days, I've noticed some discussions, which is great. Some of these discussions have exploded in some of the Isese corners. People are starting to hear this, and of course, it ruffles feathers. As to be expected, nobody wants to accept the Islamic origin, or at least in those sectors, for different reasons. Sometimes there's commercial reasons. Other times there are moral reasons or credit reasons. People, nationalistic reasons. People want to feel like this is their creation. It's like telling a Cuban that salsa is not from Cuba, or I don't know, rumba, Afro-Cubana is not from Cuba. They'll freak out. They'll go, "This is ours. This is our national creation." So I don't deal with those emotionalisms. I'm going to be dealing with logic, and we're going to be dealing with facts. So far, the facts on the ground, what's been proven right now, have been discussed in Diaspora and Origins number 3 and Diaspora and Origins number 4. So please see those, otherwise you're going to be a little bit lost in this conversation. But suffice to say, we already have enough documentation, both statements from the Alafing of Oyo in 2016, statements from the historians of the Alafing in 1899. We have documentation from the Arabs, all that suggest, or rather explain or show, that they had the 16 geomantic symbols much earlier than the 1300 after death, which is when Odudu arrives to the areas of Jerusalem, and between 1300 after death and 1500 after death is when Ifa at some point there begins to permeate or enter the areas of Jerusalem because of the Arab traders. But that's all explained in Diaspora and Origins 3 and 4, so please go and see those first and then see this video. The purpose of this video is to refute some of the general critiques, or the general common critiques that I'm seeing. I've saw at least 8 different points of view, or points that I wanted to respond to very clearly. First thing I want to say is that I'm noticing very disappointingly that some of the people who are criticizing the theory or the postulate, let's put it that way, that the Arabs created Ifa, have not provided any evidence against it. The main theory, or the synthesis of the critiques, goes along this line. Nobody knows for sure, nobody knows for sure where Ifa came from. We can't prove Ifa came from Nigeria. We also can't, the people like me, can't prove that it came from the Arab world. It was an oral tradition information. There's no written evidence. There's no carbon dating evidence that proves that Ifa was theirs, at least, 1,000 years ago and that sort of thing, or 2,000 years ago. There's nothing. So because we don't have anything, I can't affirm that it's Arabic. They can't affirm that it's from Nigeria. That's the general argument I've heard from a lot of people. Now, in my Spanish version of this video, I said that there's people that are very capable in using what's called smoke bombs. You ever seen those movies with the ninjas? Ninjas are basically, as you know, the assassins of the shoguns. They weren't the warriors like the samurai who would fight face to face. Their tactic was to, in the darkness and the shadows, use the shadows and darkness to their advantage, be able to get close to their victim, stab them in the back, cut their throat, do whatever they needed to do an assassination, and then leave quickly. So when they were caught, if the lights were turned on in a home, if they were detected and the element of surprise was lost, they wouldn't fight with people as much as they could. They would try to leave as much as they could. And what would they do to get out? They grab a smoke bomb, poof, explode something, confuse people, and in the darkness run away. So I am noticing that a lot of the detractors of my arguments are essentially doing the same thing. Instead of facing head on saying, this is my evidence, here it is, Here's paper 1, here's paper 2, here's paper 3. Let me show you why. In this book, so-and-so said this. In this book, so-and-so said this. It's impossible that it was Arabic origin because of this. There's nothing. There's nothing. I haven't seen, and I've seen at least good 2 or 3 videos, basically replying to my investigations. I haven't seen anybody, even in the comments to my videos, that have been able to provide any evidence that I say, okay, this guy's actually talking for real. It's been mostly what we say in Spanish, mofa, and mocking. It's been a lot of mocking, a lot of joking, a lot of, I can't believe you're saying that, who are you, you're crazy to think that sort of thing, but no evidence. Nobody provides the evidence. I came forward with evidence in Diaspora and Origins 3 and 4, and I've been waiting for some counter evidence. The reason you will not find any evidence is because the anthropological consensus on this is already clear, and it's been clear for over 50, 60 years. So when some of these people go back to the books that everybody knows, that are the main important anthropological studies of Ifa tradition in Nigeria, in the Yoruba land areas, they're all stumbling upon the reality that all those anthropologists all came to a conclusion that Islamic geomancy was the common source. That before Ifa in Nigeria, or their diasporic version of Ifa, there was already the 60 major geomantic signs in Arabic culture and Chinese culture. And when they realize that, and they know they can't come on camera like I am, very confidently, and showing, here it is, look at Skinner, look at Bascom, look at Momaipo, look what he says right here, look at this guy. They can't do that like I am doing it. Then they are, resorting to the throwing of smoke bombs. Poof! So in order to cloud everything, make everything so confusing that a person watching these videos can't really follow along with the chronology, can't follow along with the logical argument. So, the hope is, if I can't win, if I can't provide proof, then let me at the very least confuse the area so that Renee can't explain, or Renee can't prove to Lukumi practitioners and others that there's an Arabic source to Ifa, and that therefore there is no basis for the fallacy, the fantasy, the political narrative, I think, the politicized narrative that Nigeria is the source of Ifa. There are economic reasons and there are political reasons for them to maintain this fallacy. And I'm going straight, as they say in English, for the jugular. No, it's not. No, it's not from Nigeria, and here's why. But the main first argument is nobody knows for sure. Well, that's a lie. And I'm going to say 3 things that will let us know that we do know for sure. One, in the investigations that provided in Diaspora Origins 3 and 4, we saw that there was some Muslim text from the Sufis, particularly the Sufi Muslim practitioners, which are a minority. A lot of the people are asking, how come we don't see it in the Arab world? How come they don't see it in most Islamic practice? Because most Islamic countries are conservative in their Islamic practice, and Sufi Islam is a very minority practice. It's an esoteric brand of the Muslims. The Christians also have their own esoteric group, the Rosicrucians, the Rosicruces. The Judaist tradition, the Hebrew tradition, has their own esoteric branch, the Kabbalistic people. In all of these cases, these practitioners are a minority. I don't know if it's an extreme minority even. It might be arguable that people could say it's an extreme minority. But bottom line is, just because they're a minority doesn't mean that it's not practiced. There is areas of the Arab world and Islamic world that practice al-Ram, that practice geomantic tradition. Okay, and we have these texts. Some of them that talk about the foundational mythology, because it's the same as with Nigerian Ifa and its own foundational mythology. I don't believe them. I don't believe that. I mean, let's put it this way. It may be true, it may be not true, but if I were to believe that the angel Gabriel gave Idris the geomantic tools, then I would have to believe the possibility, and that's always upon the table, even though people may think it'd be crazy. The possibility that extraterrestrials were the ones who taught humans this information. And then that behooves us to ask, is Gabriel or the angels or the Orishas or the voodoo and all these entities that's supposed to come from heaven and teach human beings this information, are they extraterrestrials? That's a discussion for another day. I'm seeding that information just to put it there to consider it. But let's get back to the actual, documentation at hand. We have these old texts from the 900 after Christ, 1000 after Christ, 11 after Christ. These are texts officially written down because the Arab people did have writings, unlike the Yoruba, who were oral tradition. They were a more primitive people in comparison to the Arabs. So I make that very clear because people get angry when I use the word primitive. I don't know any other way of saying set back or not as comparable or not as advanced. I don't know how to say it that will be more PC for people. But basically, they were not at the same level as the Arabs in the 1900. It's not 1900, 900, 1000, 1100. We have documents that show the geomantic symbols for those centuries. Oduduwa had not entered Yorubaland until 1300, over 300 years afterwards. And if we are to accept the Alafin of Oyo statement in 2016 that Ifa penetrates, or rather, it penetrates and is properly accepted among the Orisha pantheon, the Yoruba accepted as part of their practices in the 16th century, which would be 1500s. We're talking that 500 to 600 years before the Yorubas accept their own variant of Ifa or create their own combination of the 16 geomantic symbols, their children, the 240, Omolus, and all the other information that was already there. The songs, the Iyeres, the Orikis, the Iwures, the Itang, the Eshifa, the Ebo, the Akoche, all the other information that they've munched into their own practice, their own diasporic practice of Ifa. If we're to accept that, then we must accept, by obligation of documentation, that the Arabs had it 500 to 600 years earlier, at the very least. We don't know if there's even documents before that, but the ones I've seen date around 900, 1000, 1100. This is basic logic. That's the first argument. The second argument against the argument that nobody knows for sure, we don't have any evidence, you don't have any evidence, so nobody knows anything. Well, we do. The second argument is we have a physical machine, we have a metal physical machine, which you guys saw in Diaspora and Origins number 4, which is in the British Museum. The book by Emily Savage Smith is dedicated completely to the examination of every possible concept associated with this machine. And this machine, this metallic machine, had over, I'm going to say 12 to 15 dials, right, that were moved, circular dials. And these dials basically have the 16 geomantic signs upon them. So we have physical visual proof that we have a machine from Arab origin, because the maker was an Arab. In fact, the inscription had his name on it. I think it was Muhammad something. So the inscription on it was Arab. The writing on it was Arab because it had Arab characters around the geomantic signs. And it's dated 1241. This is at the very least 50 to 100 years before Oduduwa arrived to Yorubaland, and at least 200 to 300 years before it's properly accepted. The Ifa was properly accepted by the Orisha, according to the Alafin of Oyo. That's a second proof that the Arabs had the geomantic signs before the Nigerians could even imagine thinking about Ifa. The Arabs already had it. That's a second proof for those that say that don't have it. But here's the kicker for me. This is a basic logic one. There's another place in the African continent that has the 16 geomantic signs. And curiously, this place is not next to Yoruba. We can understand the Igbo Ifa next to the Yorubas. We can understand the Fonfa, the Ewefa. They also have Fa traditions, the Mali people, the Bamana people. There could be an argument made that first Yorubaland took that information from the Arabs and then it spread to the other areas. That's an argument. It's not proven, but it's an argument that can be made. Another argument can be made that all these ethnicities in West Africa essentially received the geomantic 16 figures from the Arabs at the same time. So we can't make the argument that the Yorubas were the primordial group there that spread it to the others. The Fon and the Ewe and the Igbo might disagree and say, no, we had it before them, or we had it at the same amount of time, or the same, generally around the same age. Okay, that can be an argument made. There's been no anthropological studies that are solid to prove that or disprove that. But we have this curious case of this ethnic group called, or the people in the island of Madagascar. Go ahead and look in your map. Take a moment and check your map. Now, I did. Madagascar is on the east coast of the African continent. The Yoruba are on the west coast of the Arabic continent. Now, let's situate ourselves in 1300, 1400, 1500 after Christ. The Yoruba, to this day, are not a very advanced people as countries go. They're not comparable to Japan, to South Korea, to the United States, Canada, Mexico, a lot of other countries. Nigeria is still one of the poorest nations in the world. Today, I'm not talking then, today, there are no hospitals or very little hospitals in the areas. They don't have a lot of paved roads in a lot of the areas of Yorubaland, a lot of the neighborhoods. They have malaria. They have yellow fever that explodes there all the time. A lot of communicable diseases. We all know that, those that visit Nigeria. So, if Nigeria right now and Yorubaland right now is very set back in comparison to the rest of the world, how was Nigeria and Yorubaland in 1300 after Christ, 1400 after Christ, 1500 after Christ? It would have been extremely much more set back. Are we to believe that a people that were so set back, that didn't have those resources to be able to make expeditions, would have crossed 3,000 miles to the east coast of Africa? Do we believe that the Yorubas were capable of crossing all the way from the west of Africa, crossing through the danger of wild animals like lions and other tribes of other ethnicities that may have been positive or negative? It might be antagonistical to them. It might have been tribes that would have killed them if they would have tried to cross their territory. And we are to believe that the Yorubas made this long expedition, this long trek from the west of Africa all the way to east of Africa, 3,000 miles. For what purpose? Why would the Yorubas would have gone from one side of the continent all the way to the other side? Commerce? But they already had commerce with the airway, with the phone, with the Arab traders on the north, the houses. They had enough commerce to be able to develop and thrive as a society. Why would they make the economically unsound and illogical trek of going 3,000 miles to the east of Africa? Why would they? Is that logical? No. Let's continue. When they would arrive to the east coast, why would they even make is there a port? Is there evidence, anthropological or archaeological evidence of a port, of a base of operation, some other kind of structure conquered, colonized territory of the Yorubas on the east coast that would suggest that they had established themselves on the east coast of Africa, any of the east coast nations? Is there? No, there isn't. Of course, because logically they would have never taken the 3,000 mile trek. Let's start there. But assuming, for the purpose of discussion, that we think that they actually did take the trek, right? And they went 3,000 miles to the east. Is there evidence there was a port? Was there evidence that there was any boats made by the Yorubas ever? Because the Yorubas were pretty landlocked where they were. So they arrive, follow the logic, they arrive for no reason, for no purpose, illogically wasting resources on an expedition that would have cost them a lot of money to make all the way to the east coast, supposedly to trade with people, when they could have done trade for a lot cheaper with people around them, which is what they actually did. But let's follow this logic. They waste resources, they do the impossible, they cross 3,000 miles, they survive wild animals, survive antagonistic tribes and ethnic groups and other civilizations that might have not allowed them cross their territory. They surprisingly make it to the east coast. They build boats, which there's no evidence there was any boats, but let's say they magically created a boat. They travel to an island 250 miles away from the east coast of Africa, which cannot be seen from the coastline of Africa. So if you're there, you don't know what the heck is in the sea. Why would you start on a boat ride and say, let's just go that way? For no reason at all. Let's just go. And whatever we find, we find. And surprisingly, they find an island called Madagascar, and they happen to have not one, many Ifa priests with them on the expedition. Why? Nobody knows. Why would an Ifa priest, which were very poor in Yorubaland at that time, they would survive from whatever the people would give them, the animals or the small resources that the people would pay them for their services. Why would poor Ifa diviners be on an expedition for trade, this theoretical, hypothetical expedition to trade on the east coast of Africa, and decide to get on a boat and say, let's just sail 250 miles that way? They arrive to Madagascar, they see a people there, and they force themselves upon the Madagascar people and teach them Ifa. Because the theory of those that argue against me is, Ifas are the Nigerian people. This is an origin of Ifa. This is a divination system that the Yoruba people created. That's the theory. This is what they're proposing. If that's the case, how the heck do the Madagascar people have the same 60 Meiji signs? Who taught them the 60 major signs? If it's a Nigerian origin divination system, the only people that could have taught them at that time in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, right? Assuming around that time is when Ifa begins to be created natively there. I'm taking the side of the people who oppose me for a moment. I'm putting aside the Arab origin for a second. They natively develop Ifa. They cross 3,000 miles through very perilous territory for no reasons, but whatever, some kind of a commerce reason. They waste all those resources trying to find trading partners 3,000 miles away in the East Coast. They create a base of operations, a port. They create a boat. They travel 250 additional miles forward to Madagascar. And they impose themselves because they have the military power to impose themselves upon a people that know their territory, who live there already, who could fight them off easily, against another primitive people. It's like, they would have come tired from the boats, hungry from the boats, without the resources from the boats. And they are strong enough to fight the Madagascar people, to beat them and force their Ifa divination system upon them. And that's how we explain that the Shigidi divination system of the Madagascar people exists, because the Nigerians taught them Ifa. This is what happens when you take fantasy and you take fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, to its illogical conclusion. You get to illogical conclusions and propositions. Why is it that the Shigidi divination system, on top of the 16 major geomantic signs, has a lot more relevance and it's closer to its origin, its true origin, the Arab origin? Why does it look so much like the Islamic divination system? What could it be? What could be the explanation? Could it be that Madagascar is here and the Arab Peninsula is right there? Saudi Arabia and Oman and Yemen are over here, and it would have been a straight shot down. Who had boats? Who had the ability, the money and the ability and the advancement to be able to branch out and cross, large bodies of water on boats? The Yoruba people, who were pretty primitive at the time, or the Arab peoples who were more advanced than them? Which makes more sense? And if we have a divination system in Madagascar, the Shigidi system, which has the 16 major signs, the Magi signs, but also has Islamic, derivatives that are very clearly proving they're very derivative of the Islamic tradition. What does it logically tell us, those that are listening to this presentation? Who were the ones who fed Ifa, or the divination system, to the Madagascar people? The Arabs or the Nigerians? Who is closer? I think it's pretty clear. It's impossible. On top of the other reasons that I explained, it's impossible that Ifa is of Nigerian origin. Because if Ifa was from Nigerian origin, the only people that would know Ifa, because of the primitive nature of the Yoruba people at the time, and their incapacity to spread so much farther out from the borders from they were, because they had enemies, they had other ethnicities that would fight them off. They were stuck to their particular empires, and they had conflicts with the Dahomey people. If they were the creators of Ifa, Ifa would have been basically limited until modern age, until the British arrived in 1850, basically limited to a very small area. The Igbo, the Fonfe, the Ewe, the Ghana, and that would be the limitation around that area. That's it. You wouldn't see it in the north of Africa. You wouldn't see it in the south of Africa. You definitely wouldn't see it 3,000 miles in East Africa. And you definitely would never, ever, ever, ever see it with an additional 250 miles of perilous sea trek to get to another island, Madagascar, and teach it to them over there. That's if you believe the Nigerian origin of Ifa. If you believe the Nigerian origin of Ifa is the explanation of Ifa, then how do you explain Madagascar having the 16 major signs? They got on their spaceships with the aliens and arrived over there in Madagascar and then taught the people over there? I think logic explains to us it was the Arabs. That's why the anthropological community, seeing the parallels between the practices in Nigeria and the parallels between the practices in Madagascar, come to the conclusion that they both have a common source: the Arabs. And they tell us we don't have any proof. And they throw this little smoke bomb, poof, to say, hey, you can't prove it, and I can't prove it, so let's just all come to an agreement that since nobody can prove it, everybody come to their own conclusion. You believe Mickey Mouse created Ifa, I'll believe Nigeria created Ifa, and you believe the Arabs created Ifa, and everybody's happy. Let's just throw smoke bombs. And that's basically what we're being given as a counter-argument, in a nutshell. But yet, they can make the mistake of not realizing that there are papers in Europe and in the Arab world dated 900, 1,000 that do have the geomantic signs. There is a machine in the British Museum, 1,241 after death, which has the geomantic systems. And we have an island in the middle of nowhere, a remote island, 250 miles away from the east coast of Africa, which would have been 3,000 miles, 3,000 additional miles away from the Yoruba, who have the same 16 geomantic signs. Obviously, the teachers of this wasn't the Nigerians. Obviously, there's another source. What is the most logical source, considering the Islamic similarity in the Shigidi system with the Arabic systems of geomancy? The Arabs. It's the logical source. It's also the people who are closest, the Arabian Peninsula. Go ahead and look in the maps. The presence of the 16 geomantic signs in Madagascar are proof enough. It's destructive proof enough that the Nigerians couldn't have made up Ifa, that the Nigerians received Ifa, and that they created their own diasporic version of Ifa, just like the Fon did, just like the Ewe did, just like the Bamana people did, just like the Mali people did, just like the Igbo did. That's fine. And then obviously, the Lukumises, we practice a derivative, a diaspora of a set of diasporas. Let's put it that way. We practice a derivative of Fonfa and Yoruba Ifa. That's it. The common ancestor way, 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 way back in the genealogy and the chronology are the Arabs. But what we practice is more similar to the diasporic variants of the Yoruba people and the Fon people in particular, and a little bit of the Ewe, but more the Fon. That's it. It's that simple. It's not that complicated to understand. It's only complicated to people who want to fundamentally defend the practice that it was created in Nigeria for their own personal pride efforts. In the case of some of the Occidental, the people from the West, people of my skin color, the Oyimbo, there are some Oyimbo that have commercial reasons for insisting that Yoruba land is the source of Ifa, without any proof, without any logic, because they have courses to teach. If you, Lukumi practitioner, feel that the Yorubas are not the origin and source and they're just another diaspora, why would you leave your diasporic tradition, Lukumi, to learn another diasporic tradition if they all work? If the Fon Fa works, Ewe Fa works, Igbo Fa works, Mali works, Bamana people's divination works, the Yoruba Isese works, and our Lukumi works, why would you change what you already have? There's no purpose, there's no logical reason to do it, because there's people who leave for not monetary reasons. There's people who leave and say, I want to learn the source. I want to be pure. I want to be closer to the origin. Well, what if I told you the Arabs were the origin? What would that do to your search for the truth and the origin? Would you waste money and resources going to another diaspora in Yoruba land? Would you waste time doing initiations there? No, you wouldn't. Logically, it would happen. You say, you know what, if everybody's a diaspora, then I guess I'll stay with what I got. And that's the fear. That's the fear that people on the web, people who are Isheshe cosplayers, who dress up in the costume but are not really Isheshe, they fear losing their money. They lose their membership. They lose the followers. They lose people who are paying for their courses. They're not interested in the truth of history. They're interested in making sure that it's not known so that they don't lose their money. That's the motivation. See, I don't make any money from teaching Ifa. Those that know me and who write me privately in WhatsApp know that I answer not one, over 30 or 40 requests every single day for questions. Anything from a mundane question about a pataki, a document, about how an ebo is done, all the way to can you refer me to somebody else, etc. Because I have a lot of contacts in Cuba. And I gladly help them all. I don't charge a single dime for that. Therefore, because I don't charge a single dime, I can sit here right here with a clean conscience and explain to everybody, using my abilities, my academically trained ability to explain why this is a derivative of Arab origin, and feel completely confident with that assertion because I have the anthropological consensus behind me, and because I've read the books and I've already taken the evidence and presented to you guys. I don't just say, here you go, I'm taking it out of my butt and I'm showing it to you guys and believe it and bye-bye, smoke bomb, the end, curtain closes. I don't do that. I take my time and explain things to you guys because I got nothing to lose, nothing to win here. I'm neutral on the matter. But there's people on the other side who have money to be lost. If all of a sudden Lukumi practitioners say, you know what, I'm persuaded by Rene's argument. This is from the Arabs. Let's just come to an agreement that all the diasporic versions are equal and I'm just going to keep practicing what I have. No tengo nada que buscar allá. There's nothing I have to look over there for. And Isheshe Ifa. What happens to everybody who depend upon people doing the conversion to Isheshe Ifa and who teach courses about this? The money disappears. And some of these guys make their entire living on teaching courses, on repeating Isefa and Itefa for people who already have Owofakang and Itefa in the Cuban tradition. Why are you going to repeat it? Why? Oh, because it's pure, it's closest to the source, its origin. That's it. That's the ideological motivation. And what if I take off the ideological? What if my videos take the ideological motivation away to actually go somewhere else and pay $2,000 just to get there, to pay an additional $2,000 or $3,000 just to do the initiations that you already had done in Cuba in the Lucumi tradition? What if I take off the motivation of being closer to the source, being pure, being origin, being more ancestral, being more tradition, being more African? What if I take that away from you? What if I say that's not the origin? What if it makes you have to think? And you go, you're right, Rene. Would you spend the $5,000 going to Nigeria? No. No, you wouldn't. Which is what they fear. That's why they throw so many smoke bombs. Poof! And they don't provide any evidence. The second argument was, we can't trust in Christian priests to tell the truth and whatever they tell. And this is an argument that came out when Samuel Johnson, when the evidence of Samuel Johnson's book in 1899 started to be known, that the historians of the Alafino Oyo in 1899 told him that Ifa came from the east, and specifically from Mecca, from the Arab world, and that Odudua was the child of I think it was a Saudi Arabian prince or king or something like that, or that Odudua was a Saudi Arabian prince. Obviously, they had to, once again, smoke bombs. Poof! We need the smoke bombs again. Poof, poof, poof. In order to not even consider the words of Samuel Johnson, they had to discredit Samuel Johnson. How could they discredit him? Oh, he was a black Christian. He was a black Christian priest. So how can you trust a black Christian priest? I'm sorry, because there's like these bees or these things around me. Get out of here, man. Did I get it? Watch me get stung here on video. If it happens, hey, I'll have to pause and nurse the wound and come back, because I'm not giving up on this Arab origin thing. So, we can't trust Christian priests because they're Christian. What type of fundamentalist viewpoint is that? I am a Ifa priest. If I was tasked to do an investigation on Hebrew Kabbalah tradition or Christian Rosacruz tradition, and I do my investigations and I present it to my committee, my academic committee at UMass or whatever, where I study, am I incapable of doing that study because I'm an Ifa priest? Are my words absolutely untrustable because I'm an Ifa priest? Why? But because Samuel Johnson was a Christian priest, we have to automatically discount his recounts. He didn't say, I'm saying it's from the East. He said the historians of the Alafin of Oyo at that time in 1899 said that it's from the East and it's from Mecca. So why are his words not trustable? And he said this at a time when there was no conception of a battle between Lukumi and Sese Ifa practitioners over the origin of Ifa. There was no ideological debate happening on the world stage. At that time, he was just relating what he was told. If he was told this was white, yeah, there was a pot there, or there was a little pan, plastic pan, and it was white. And the historians of Ayo said that it was a what? That's it. There's no controversy with the statements. He didn't know he was creating controversy. He's dead. This was done in 1899. How would he imagine that in 2025 we still would be debating his words? Some people would be using it as evidence that this existed, that this was the thinking of the Yorubas at the time, and others will be discounting it on the argument that he's Christian. Once again, you can't argue the point. Smoke bomb. And that's what they do. That's what they do with that argument. The third argument is you can't trust in the words of a Yoruba monarch that doesn't even practice Ifa. And this is done to discredit the new letter, which has everybody. I can tell in the words and the way they present it. They're very scared of this document that was released. I released it and other people released it on the web. It's an official letter or some kind of newsletter or some kind of pronouncement, let's put it that way. It's on the letterhead, all the graphics, all the colors, the signature, everything suggests it's an official document from the Alafin of Oyo in 2016, the one who passed away recently. And in that document, in no uncertain terms, in English, he says that Ifa was a knowledge that was brought to Nigeria through evolution and migration, incorporated into the native cults that existed there. Oh, I think the floating machines here from the pool are falling over. Maybe the Egun are around, who knows? So, that Ifa came from evolution and migration, that it mixes in with the native Orisha cults, that it enters Yoruba land in probably in the 1500s, right, or 1400s. That's taught to the Aladeo Valado. The Aladeo Valado teaches it to the Alafin of Inran in the 16th century, and says that this is a new divination system that penetrated the Yoruba land, and it was of Arabic origin. He says those words. The words Arabic origins are on the paper. That document has ruffled feathers, but it's also, there's a saying in Puerto Rico, when you kill a chicken and you go, the chicken just starts flapping around desperately because it's been caught, it's been killed. And right now I'm seeing a lot of chickens desperately freaking out. Oh my God, the Alafino Mayo said that. They can't discount his words. They're very clear on the paper. So how do you discount the credibility of the paper? You go against the source. Once again, the same tactic that they did with Samuel Johnson. Smoke bomb. Poof. So now they claim that if he is not a practitioner Ifa, and I don't know if he was or not, or maybe he wasn't a majority practitioner Ifa. Now the argument is because his loyalty is to Islam, or he was a Muslim practitioner, that of course he would discount Ifa practice or claim that it was Arabic in origin, that he had a vested interest in claiming that the Arabs funded or made Ifa divination in Africa, instead of just positively considering that maybe he was just relating what he knew and what he had been taught all his life, and what makes logical sense considering the argument of Madagascar that I made already. No, that's impossible. It must be that there is a ulterior motive. So that's the argument against the Alafin now. We can't trust monarchs because he's not from that tradition. And I make the same argument I made with the Christian priest Samuel Johnson. Why? This is a man that has been surrounded by Ifa practitioners all his life, who has diviners of the court, who had Orishas and Oyo all around him. Why would you believe that him, after hearing what everybody else around him discusses, would say, thank you for everything, everything you guys say, but you know what? I'm going to make damage to the Yoruba tradition. I'm going to say that it comes from the Arabs just to make it up. I'm going to pull it out of my butt, and I'm going to say this publicly right before I die, and bye-bye to all you Ifa practitioners who I've lived with all my life, who are my family, who are my friends, people in my court and in my community. I'm just going to make this up. Does that make logical sense to you guys? Here we go. So I was given the argument that because I'm making these arguments publicly, that I should abandon Ifa because I'm questioning its origins. Why? The fact that I'm questioning the origins doesn't mean that I am any less of a Lukumi Ifa practitioner. I am understanding that there's an Arabic origin. It falls to Yoruba land and to the areas of Dahomey. They create the diasporic versions, and then those diasporic versions came to the Americas, to Cuba through slavery. And I learned it in Puerto Rico and Cuba as a resident of two islands who had been populated by slaves. There's the chronology and geology. It's not too complicated. Why would I have to renounce my Lukumi Ifa practicing because I insisted upon a historical record that is truthful and that's fundamentalist and not mythology, like my detractors are doing? Makes no logical sense. Then we had another argument. There was the argument that there was evidence, or I guess archaeological evidence, that there had been people populating the areas of the Yoruba land for 1600 before Christ, which would have been 1,900 years before the presence of Oduduwa. That's possible. That's like telling me that, that's like trying to make the argument that the Native Americans here in the United States had an advanced political system like the United States Senate, and they had the whole Constitution, and they had all the society that we have all around us because there's evidence of people who lived on the continent of North America at the time. Yeah, they were a lot more primitive than the Yorubas were in 1300, which was already pretty primitive. That doesn't mean that Ifa was with them. It just means that there's people there. And who knows if it was the Yoruba people? Who knows if it was another ethnic groups that were pre-Yoruba people? Because migration and movement occurred. That doesn't prove anything. The evidence of human beings in Yoruba land areas prior to 1600 before Christ doesn't mean that they were Yoruba, that they had those same songs, traditions, cultural practices, and much less so that they had the Ifa divination system. There's no proof that the Ifa divination system existed in the 16 before Christ, or 600, I'm sorry, before Christ. So we talked about the Madagascar argument. Then the next argument is similar to the one for Samuel Johnson and the monarch, the Yoruba monarch, that we should ignore all the anthropologists because they're white, because they're non-religious, because they're European. Again, another smoke bomb. If you're not part of the Ifa tradition, your words don't matter. If you're not Yoruba, your words don't matter. Why? For good or for worse, the people who did the best field studies, scientifically backed up searches and investigations are Europeans. William Bacon, Bernard Mapoil, Burton, Ellis. Shield, Hartman, Skinner, Du Bois. You know, why would we discount their academic studies, all of them, which come to the anthropological consensus that the Arabs gave Ifa to the Nigerians, just because they're white and Europeans? Give me a solid reason why. Oh, they possibly could have known. They just came for a week. They only wrote down what they saw. Then they left. They don't know anything. Well, it wasn't just a week. And it's pretty interesting that not one, all of them pretty much come to the same conclusion. Kind of weird there, huh? And then finally, we have an argument here that there was a mask that was found in Benin, a bronze mask, that had the sign in Yogbe marked upon it from 1400 after death. And that's an argument that if I was there natively, case closed, throw smoke bomb, close the curtain, the end, bye-bye. Yeah, let's bring the curtain over here. Let's clear the smoke for a moment. Let's make a clarification. 1400 after death would have been 100 years after the arrival of Dudua. And we already had geomantic machines in the British Museum from 1241 in the Arab world, and texts in the Arab world from 1000 or 900 after death. 200, 300 years or 400 years before the Yorubas even had it. Before that bronze mask existed, the Arabs already had the 16 geomantic signs, and we have proof of it. So that doesn't prove that the Yorubas were the founders of Ifa. Okay, I think I've pretty much touched everything. The last topic I'm going to talk about is the issue of burden of proof. You guys have heard about that concept in a North American legal tradition. In the North American USA legal tradition, there's this concept of the burden of proof. And it goes like this. If you accuse somebody or you make a statement, I am making a statement that, I don't know, this is my house. I need to be able to prove that statement. You guys are not obligated to believe me. The burden, the obligation of proof is on me to prove that this is my house. How do I do that? I have to go to City Hall. I have to go to the Registry of Properties here in this particular city. If it's not here, I have to go to the Registry of Properties in the state of Massachusetts. Maybe have their different offices. I have to go get a document that clearly states, I, on such and such date, paid this sum of money to the people who were here before, the owners of this home, who were an elderly couple. Now that I remember, they were in the 90s. I bought the property from them. I signed, the lawyer signed the documents, and here's the proof dated on such and such date, that as of that date forward, Rene Gonzalez is the owner of all this property around here. That's my burden of proof to you guys. If I make the argument to the world that Ifa is created in Nigeria, the burden of proof is on me to prove to the world, to everybody, I created this. It's not enough to say, look, I found this pot in my territory, it's mine. Well, how do you know it's mine? What if this right here didn't belong to me, it belongs to my wife or my kids, and they put it here, but I'm making the claim on camera in front of you guys. This is mine. I created this. I brought this here. And then my kid comes over with a receipt from Kmart or from Toys R Us or what, it says, no, look, here's the receipt, puppy. This is part of a, what do you call it, a kid's, food set. This is from the kids, like that. This is from a kid's set, and here's the receipt. I bought it. It's $100. Look, puppy, I bought this 2 years ago. Who would have the proof? The person who has the paper showing me that this was there, or me making it up that I created this, but without any burden of proof? The burden of proof to prove to the rest of the world that Ifa comes from Nigeria is upon the people who are Ishesha practitioners who keep claiming this false narrative. It's not enough to disrespect people like me or others making the counter argument. It's not enough to just proclaim it and that's it. If you don't believe it, that's on you. You're crazy. Smoke bomb, close the curtains, the end. No, that's not enough. You need to bring proof. And when it comes to this argument online that we're having, the proof has been brought, but not by them, by me. And the proof, which is in the books, which is in the encyclopedia, not encyclopedia, the libraries of the United States and in Great Britain, of all the top 6 or 7 investigations, anthropological investigations about the roots of geomancy in African systems, all of them come to the anthropological consensus, stated on ink and paper, that it's of Arab origin, of Islamic geomancy, of Al-Realm. And that later, the groups in West Africa, the ethnic groups in West Africa, created their own diasporic variations, in which upon they incorporated some of their other traditions, their stories, their fables, their folk tales, the concept of animal sacrifice, which you don't see a lot in the Arab practice. That's okay. Nobody's discounting that the Ishesha, that the Yoruba people created their own diasporic variant. That is fine. That is acceptable. I am ceding that argument publicly. But you guys are not the origin of Ifa. You have the burden of proof to prove it to everybody. And if you can't prove it, then the proof that remains is that the Arabs created Ifa. Thank you very much for listening to these refutations of the arguments against the Arab origin. Iboru, Iboya, Ibocheche.